Okay, so number two is our cost code types. So if we have a look at our annual return, now that we're happy, we've got no error messages, we're in a good position. What we can also have a look at and check behind the scenes as well is that when we're putting our transactions into Scribe, that they're actually populating the annual return correctly. So they're appearing in the correct boxes. You can see on here, so this is my annual return 25-26. I'm not seeing a preset value in box 2. I've got some staff costs in box 4. I've not got a loan in this scenario, so I've not got anything in box 5. But what we need to make sure in the background is that we've allocated our cost code types correctly in order that these boxes populate. So if you run the annual return and you think, well, I know I've had a preset payment and I've entered that, or my staff cost doesn't look correct, then potentially you've got an issue with the cost code types. So it's always good to check that as well. So to do that, we can go to Setup in the menu and into Cost Codes. So here are all our cost codes in a list, and the best way just to check is to make sure that you've got the type in the columns. So if you're not seeing that as I'm not here, you can click into columns, click to select the type and apply, and you see that comes up as an additional option there. Now, the majority of your codes are default, and when you've set them up, and you might remember that if you're new to Scribe, you'll have gone through that process, all cost code types have a type of default. That means if you enter a payment with a code to a default setting, it will go into box 6, other payments. If you enter a receipt, it will be defaulted into box 3, other receipts. If therefore you want to distinguish between that, say actually this is the precept, or it's the staff costs, or it's my loan repayment, we need to tell it differently. So to check if you've got type set, I would suggest that you click on that type heading because it will sort accordingly, and you can see it's sorted in reverse for me. So these ones at the top here have the type of staff. So if I allocate transactions to these 3 codes at the top, they will go into box 4 rather than box 6, other payments. So that on my codes, staff cost, tax, NI and pension. So it's just making sure that anything to do with box 4 is feeding into that type of staff. Remember, it is just core salary costs. So salary, NI, tax, pension. It's not things like training or sort of payroll admin costs, things that you might have under your staff cost setting, but aren't actually box 4. But if you check the practitioner's guide for any uncertainty, you can just check that within there. But these are the types that we've got. I haven't, though, got my precept set correctly. So if I type in my precept code, and if you remember, we weren't seeing anything in box 2, I can click into any codes that I believe are incorrect, and we can review accordingly. So here's my code for the precept, cost code number 1. It's currently got a type default. So if I enter my precept receipt that I receive into Scribe and code it to the precept, at the moment, it's going to appear in box 3, other receipts, because I've not told it any differently. As a result, I need to click into the type and I need to make sure it's set correctly. Okay, so if I now tell it the precept, it means anything that I've allocated to this code will now appear in box 2. So generally, you're going to have one code for the precept, and that should have the type of precept. You're going to have one or more codes to do with your staff costs, and they all need to be set to the type of staff to feed into box 4. And if you have a loan and you're making those repayments against it, you need a separate code for that, and that needs to be set to capital repayment. Everything else is just the default setting. So if I now update that one, remember any changes obviously save at the bottom, that will now populate that, and we can see I've got a type of precept set against it. So if I return here to my annual return, now I've made that change, I'm just going to calculate to make sure everything gets picked up correctly, and I run my annual return. Here we go. Then you can see that there we go. I've now got something appearing which wasn't before, and that was simply based on my cost code types. So that's the best way to do it. So you can check the types by that method that we've just talked about, and that's what determines where they appear. If you have, for example, staff cost where you have a number of codes going into it, you can obviously check the settings, but if you did want to review, do remember as well that you can have a look by going to the filter. These are the breakdowns that you can run as well. So if you did just want to say, right, I really want to make sure everything I've got in staff costs is correct, you can click into there, click view report, and just make sure in there these are the things that are feeding into my box for. Not very much at the moment, obviously in my fictitious account, but you can then check it line by line just to make sure I haven't got anything, inadvertently coded into there as well. Obviously, that's something again that we'd mention at the end of the year and sort of as part of the year-end process, but initially can also be useful just to check as well if you want to.